Hi, my name is Steve, and this is Christianity Out Loud. Thank you for watching. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. Whatever you're doing, watching, tuning in, listening, any of the above, all of the above. Excuse me. Firstly, a little apology for last week, missing last week's. I did say we had some illness in the house, which is true. We've all had a virus that shall remain unnamed. So there you go. Still a little bit lingering at the moment, but we're all pretty well over it. So if I cough or sneeze or clear my throat or do something like that or sound a bit nasally, that's why. But other than that, we are all good here. If you like what's happening here, what I'm trying to do, why don't you hit that subscribe bell on YouTube or the equivalent, because I've forgotten what it is, on Rumble. That way you'll get notified of a new weekly word whenever it is uploaded. As I said a couple of weeks ago, I am trying for every week, which can be a little bit difficult at times with a full-time job as well. Throw in storms and car trouble and then sickness. Sometimes it's just not possible. But, engaging with a few more social media platforms. So, feel free to follow, feel free to, send comments about anything and everything. It's certainly not a closed off community. I'm very interested in, everything social, cultural, political, etc. Examining that through a Christian lens. So if you've got something that is of interest to you and you want me to have a look at or explore, why don't you send it through? The book, make sure you go and grab a copy. Actually got another royalty check for that yesterday in the mail here. No, it's not quite enough for me to retire on just yet, but working on it. So if you'd like to contribute to my retirement from my current full-time job, go buy a book. That'll be good. Plus, it's a good read. I think so. I'm not biased at all there. So anyway, I digress. Bit of a long introduction, but thank you for watching and tuning in and all of that. I really do appreciate it. I appreciate the comments. I appreciate the likes. So it's good. A bit of an interesting concept this week. And I sort of came across it last week, and it will all sort of become clear as I explain it. I'm generally no fan of politicians. I'm no fan of political parties. Just basically my bottom line is find me one that isn't corrupt. I don't mean out and out beholden to everybody. I just mean find me one that's not able to be swayed on anything, particularly if you're a member of one of the big 2 or 3 political parties here in Australia. Our Prime Minister here, he is, that's a little bit unfair. He is a devout Pentecostal Christian. And it's interesting, if I ever met him, which is unlikely, but if I ever met him, I think one of the first questions I'd ask is how he reconciles, the Christian understanding of truth and telling truth and embodying truth, how he reconciles that with the truth bending. I would say that politicians are renowned for, have a reputation for, one I think that's entirely justified as well. Throat clearing. I'm certainly no fan of the Labor Party. here in Australia. The equivalent, if you're watching from overseas, would be the Democratic Party in the US. That's the equivalent to it's our left side of the aisle here. That's our major party that's on that side anyway. I was far more open to them about 10 years ago, I guess, when they sort of were predominantly, the political party of the working class, if you like, or the middle class. But about 10 years ago, coincidentally, when I lost interest in them, they unofficially formed a bit of a coalition with the party that's known as the Greens here. And I'm absolutely no fan of them. As far as I'm concerned, they are out and out radical. They've got no idea really of how economies work. They've got no idea of finance. Basically, they've taken up the cause of every minority group. So the LGBTQ, add all the letters, not being disrespectful. I can't remember the acronym. They've taken up every cause that that particular social group seems to champion. So they're no longer simply prioritising, the environment and sustainability. So not a fan of them at all. So regardless of my views of them, there's a big push in Australian politics, culture, society in general, to be more, inverted commas, inclusive. So there's a big focus on having women represented everywhere in all aspects of everything. Okay, now I'm not opposed to that, generally speaking. My philosophy tends to be let the most suitable, qualified, experienced person for the job have the job. And I really don't care whether they're male, female, makes no difference to me at all. But that's just me. That's a radical thought idea these days. And unfortunately, when women are placed or make their way into, what are historically male-dominated industries, which is not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, it just is what it is. When women sort of find their way, or make their way rather, into those sorts of industries or areas or jobs, think of a few politics because that's what I'm focused on this evening. A lot of the time, poor behaviour ensues, and that needs to be stopped. It's not good enough. There is no reason for a man or a male to be treating a female colleague as a lesser colleague or anything like that. That just shouldn't happen. Okay, just so you know my opinion right from the outset. Yeah, we've got a few high-profile, what you would call them, female activists. I guess it'd be a very loose description of what they're doing here in Australia at the moment. They've been in the media a little bit. Grace Tame is one. Brittany Higgins is the other. Regardless of what you think of them and their actions over the past month or so, I don't know enough about it. I have no opinion either way. But they're driving this sort of, change, I guess. We're wanting to see this change. And related to that, there was a sad, a death in the Federal Labor Party. Pretty sure it was Federal Labor Party this past week. Yes, it was federal. Just check my notes there. A Senator, Kimberly Kitching, who was only in her early 50s, I believe, passed away from a heart attack. And I mean that that's sad. It's never, it's never a nice thing when someone that young passes away from an untimely event, shall we say. Okay. I mentioned earlier I was no fan of the Labor Party. She was a federal Labor senator. I didn't know much about her. The only things I really know about her now is what I've read in subsequent reports, and I'll get to that in a moment. Now, the other unfortunate aspect of that is that she was subject to some very poor treatment by members of her own political party. So it's not just across the party aisles here where there is animosity. It can come from within your own political party, your own industry, your own area as well. Now, if I left it at that, excuse me, if I left it at that and just said she was subject to bullying, harassment, that sort of behaviour, I wonder where your mind would go. And I think probably historically, justifiably, you would go to, probably some men in her party were being chauvinistic or that sort of thing. And that, that wouldn't be an unfair estimate. I'm just going to put a pause here and say this is no defense of men, okay, or poor male behaviour. So don't think I'm up on a soapbox doing a woe is men. See what I did there? A woe is men, speech, because that's not what I'm doing here. So unpause. Now, according to those people who knew Ms. Kitching, and she had friends across the political spectrum, which I found quite interesting. And so the Labor Party being the left side of politics, many of Ms. Kitching's friends are renowned right-wing advocates and journalists, and I found that very interesting to read. So that would suggest her views were moderate, sensible, pragmatic. She was quite possibly the answer to the Labor Party's current ideological madness, let's say. I guess if you're in America watching this, from what I can gather, she's probably like what Tulsi Gabbard would be to the Democratic Party if she was able to get back in. She would be the sort of the antidote to their, highly sort of left-wing agenda. And by ideological madness, I'm talking about the wokeness, the social justice, the cultural Marxists, virtue signalers, all of that. So, the names of the people responsible for the bullying and harassment of Ms. Kitching. So, they would be senior, that didn't come as a surprise, senior Labor members, Penny Wong, Christina Keneally, and Katie Gallagher. And yes, you're correct, they're all women. Now, the Labor Party here has made a fair bit of a song and dance about how other political parties have treated women. So what, therefore, was their response to these accusations coming to light? We don't want to talk about it. After the funeral, we're all just going to move on. I'm not going to respond to these claims. Ostrich, head, sand. La la la. Nothing to see. What do we do? What do we do with that? I don't mean, excuse me, I don't mean the bullying and the harassment of women in any industry. That shouldn't happen, right? Shouldn't happen. Been there, said it. I'm not going to harp on about that. I think I've made myself fairly clear. I don't think anyone should be elected or appointed to any position as a token. I think they should earn it. Harassment in workplaces shouldn't occur. That's not really what I'm asking. What I'm asking is, what do we do with the blatant hypocrisy that is on display here? What do we do with the critique, public critique of a certain behaviour whilst undertaking that very same behaviour? What do we do with that? See, I think there's a problem in society and culture today. Well, a problem. I think there's many problems, but specifically it relates to this sort of thing. Truth. We have a problem with truth. We have a problem with accountability, and we have a problem with forgiveness. Truth, accountability, forgiveness, amongst the various other problems that we have. And I think that issue, or the issue of truth, accountability, and forgiveness, that goes a lot deeper than just Australian political parties. Firstly, truth. There seems to me to be one side of politics, culture, society that is built on the premise that there is no truth but power. No truth but power. There is nothing bigger than the individual self, okay, and the world revolves around me. And what do we see from these sorts of people? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I present past 2 years. And I'm not rehashing my views on COVID here, okay? Now speaking from first-hand experience. I said I wasn't going to mention it, sorry. You worked it out anyway. Now speaking from first-hand experience, I'm not going to rehash my opinion on COVID. Nothing much has changed there. Nothing much. Nothing has changed there. Okay, you want to get vaccinated, go and do it. I don't care. I'm not a doctor, go talk to your doctor. Right? But that narrative has changed so many times now, it's broken. It is gone. It is in a million pieces on the floor. And I'm not talking the early days. I'm not talking March 2020 when, okay, I didn't agree, but I could understand, okay, we don't know what it is. Fair enough. We don't know what it is. Let's just see what it is. I mean, nowadays, March, 2022, vaccine mandates exist to slow the spread, or whatever 3-word catchphrase we're shouting out at the moment. And the vaccine has literally done nothing. It doesn't prevent anything. It doesn't stop the spread of anything. Again, you want it, go get it. I don't care. You do what you feel you need to do. But it hasn't stopped anything. But we're still slow to spread, or whatever catchphrase we got. There's no truth but power. They've maintained power. That is for sure. And we as in Australia, are going to have a very interesting federal election in a few months' time, because there's been very little cooperation, state and federally, and all the states basically just put up the walls and went, no, we're in charge. It is our rule, our way or else. But further than that, Israel Folau, remember him? He hasn't played professional sport in Australia since, I think, 2019, because forgiveness doesn't exist. You can go, but what about his behaviour? What about it? He put out a tweet. Well, okay, it wasn't a real intelligent tweet, but he's a professional rugby union player. We're not expecting him to be Einstein. Okay, he could have had better management that said, don't do it. Why do you need to do it? But forgiveness doesn't exist. Forgiveness does not exist in society. People cannot get past the fact that he wrote what he wrote, which incidentally wasn't offensive. And now we've got these revelations that Senator Kimberly Kitching, subject to bullying and vitriolic behaviour from within her own political party by women, what's more, and the lack of accountability and owning behaviour. It's clear. That's one side. It seems to me that the other side of politics or society or culture, whatever you want to call that, is built on the idea of truth. That something exists that is bigger than the self, and that the world does not revolve around me. What do I mean by that? I mean that group of people, big portion, okay, spans many sort of belief sets and systems, but they will start from a factual perspective. Here is the fact. Here is the truth. And then their opinions are extrapolated, and then they view whatever that is through the lens of their own bias. That's what I mean by that. Okay? So everything I look at on this podcast, on this channel here, everything I look at is through the lens of Christianity. It is through the lens of the Bible. That's my bias. You couldn't tell that by the name of the channel. I've made it fairly clear. Okay? Yeah, I'm a Bible-believing Christian. I believe in Jesus Christ. Okay, I believe I'm a sinful person who needs a say. That's the lens in which I'm looking at this through. But what I'm looking at, every time I look at something or examine something, I'm starting with, or at least I'm trying to start with, a fact or a truth or something that is real and tangible. I made an error the other week. Believe it or not, I made an error. And someone in the comments let me know, which is very good. A shout out to you if you are listening and watching. I did appreciate that. I said a study, excuse me. I said that a study was, I remember what I said. study was from Johns Hopkins University. I think that's what I'd said. No, that wasn't quite correct. This person in the comments pointed it out to me that no, the study actually wasn't endorsed by Johns Hopkins, but somebody who had undertaken that study worked there. So Johns Hopkins didn't actually stand by the results, not because they weren't true or correct, but they hadn't been peer reviewed, etc. Now that's a slight error. Well, I think it's only a slight error, but I made it, and I'll try and do better. Now, I should have researched that a little bit more. No excuse, but the full-time job and this. But I'll try and do better. Okay, so that's a mistake, and this is not me on a soapbox going, yeah, look at me, I can own mistakes. No, it is what it is. If I'm not honest and transparent about it, what's the point? And I've mentioned the bias. But that still doesn't answer the question, which is what do we do with it? Not the bias, but what do we do with this blatant hypocrisy? What do we do? Well, the short answer is we do have a federal election coming up very soon, and you don't have to vote for them. But I think deeper than that, and on a much more individual level, what do we do with hypocrisy like that? I would caution against judgment, torch and pitchfork judgment, because if you live in a glass house, you shouldn't throw stones, as the old saying goes, or to put a Christian spin on it. I'm sure there's a verse somewhere about, a speck in someone else's eye and a plank in your own. So we caution against that sort of judgment. But what do? So don't get caught in the same behaviour. That'd be a good start. Don't get caught in that same pattern of behaviour. Don't be a hypocrite. And I think, again, on an individual level, but almost in a far greater realm scheme, something, we cannot keep looking to government as God. We can't do it. We cannot do it. All right? The fact is these people are fallible. They will make mistakes. If they make mistakes, I hope they own it. But they will also engage in hypocritical behaviour, blatantly hypocritical behaviour. Why? The cynic in me says, well, that's just because they're politicians. But ultimately, as poor as their behaviour is, so what? They're not my God. I don't rely on them for anything. They don't sustain me. They're not the bread of life. I have to keep them in their place, in the right place in my life, which is not God. And I think that is what we can do with hypocritical behaviour like that. So until next week, God bless.